Hare Krishna. Glad to see you all. At the beginning of Hare Krishna, at the beginning of creation, which takes place at intervals, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhutva Bhutva Praliyate, Rat Ragame Praliyante, Tatra Vyavyakta Samjake. The material energy, which is kind of a throwaway. Krishna, as a master artist, maybe working on a pot, throws a little piece of clay to the side. That's the material world. So, still, it's the most amazing place. And it's inhabited by as many atoms as there are in the material world. There are that many living entities as well, who are conditioned by the three modes of material nature. And in the Leela that Krishna performs in regard to the material world, called the Shrishti Leela, he is mostly concerned with overseeing the workings of the material energy. And of course, he's concerned ultimately with delivering the living entities who have become somehow or other ensconced in this predicament of the material world. In the beginning of each creation, Brahma is born from the navel pit of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And as he becomes aware of himself, he realizes he doesn't know where he is, and he doesn't know where he came from or where he's going. This is the same situation that we're all in. At least I know for sure I am. That I have no idea how I was born, who I was when I was born, and so forth. So Brahma begins to search out his origin, even climbing down the lotus stem. He's almost blown from the lotus because of the strong winds in the ocean of creation that is half of this universe. And as he's in this self-searching mood, trying to find out his origin, he attracts the attention of Krishna, who utters the syllables tapa. And as we'll hear in the Brahma Samhita today, there's a way in which divine Saraswati comes before Lord Brahma and tells him that, please recite this mantra, Uvacha Puratas Tasmai Tasya Divya Saraswati Kama Krishnaya Govinda He Gopi Jana Ityapi Balabhaya Prayavanir Mantram Te Tasati Prayam. If you repeat this mantra, Tapastam Tapa Etena Tava Siddhir Bhavishyati, then you'll get all perfection. So Brahma begins to perform tapasya. And in regard to the Brahma Samhita, that tapasya has to do with his repetition of the mantra. And from that, Krishna reveals to him the nature of the spiritual world, and he's able to see it for himself. As he sees the spiritual world, he describes it. And this is called revealed scripture. We get information from anywhere from someone who was there, someone who saw it. Otherwise, we have no access to any kind of knowledge. Our senses are imperfect, so we must hear from a perfect eyewitness. So in the Vedic system, Lord Brahma is taken as the perfect eyewitness. And therefore, we recite this Brahma Samhita, which is a compilation of some of the prayers that Lord Brahma recited at the beginning of creation when he had revelation of the spiritual world. So this is a look into the spiritual world. This knowledge was recovered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on his tour of South India. He he visited the Adikeshava temple, and there he found this most important scripture. These scriptures are invaluable, and this world's always changing, and many of them become lost. There were more than 100 chapters of the Brahma Samhita, or perhaps there's 100 altogether. There's only one chapter left. This is the 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita. For the other chapters, you'll have to go back to Godhead, and maybe you'll see them. Recently, we were in Calcutta, and we visited the special library project Harisari Prabhu has set up, in which the books, the personal books of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur are preserved, as well as there's also there a collection of thousands of other authentic, original Vedic scriptures, which specifically are relevant to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And you can see that there's a process through which they're preserving them, because they're all falling apart. Just a few hundred years and things fall apart. And that's what Krishna says to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that even as this knowledge is being passed down, it also becomes distorted due to the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. And therefore it has to be refreshed regularly. Similarly, in our practice of devotional service, we have to every day refresh. Because it's not that if you simply practice one day, you're good for the rest of your life. And some people also think that I'll wait till I'm old and then I'll practice. Now's not the time. This is also a fallacy. Krishna says to Brahma in the original verses he spoke, telling him about the absolute truth, that in all times, in all places, in all circumstances, one must search out the supreme absolute truth. So, it's a miracle that we have this. It was brought out by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he found it in the library. It was written on palm leaf. And he had to have it copied by hand. So in that way it was preserved. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur printed it, paper books. My spiritual masters, Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and the founder Acharya of ISKCON, recommended, as his spiritual master did, that we should enter into this hymn as a regular daily function to remember the spiritual world. So, okay. So, we'll read now what's been passed down to us through the disciplic succession, this special knowledge of the spiritual world, so with great care and attention. So let's recite the English verses, the translation of this 5th chapter of the Brahma Samhita together. And you can refer to the screen if you like, or there's individual books that we can give to you, but most people don't have a problem with the screen. But if you do, let us know and we'll give you a book. Can everyone see that okay? Anybody need a book? Would you like a book? Anyone? Okay. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead altogether, please. He has an eternal, blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. The spiritual place of transcendental pastimes of Krishna is portrayed in the 2nd verse. The super excellent station of Krishna, which is known as Gokula, has thousands of petals and a corolla like that of a lotus sprouted from a part of his infinitary aspect, the whirl of the leaves being the actual abode of Krishna. The whirl of that transcendental lotus is the realm wherein dwells Krishna. It is a hexagonal figure, the abode of the indwelling, predominated, and predominating aspect of the Absolute. Like a diamond, the central supporting figure of self-luminous Krishna stands as the transcendental source of all potencies. The holy name, consisting of 18 transcendental letters, is manifested in a hexagonal figure with sixfold divisions. The whirl of that eternal realm, Gokula, is the hexagonal abode of Krishna. Its petals are the abodes of gopis, who are part and parcel of Krishna, to whom they are most lovingly devoted and are similar in essence. The petals shine beautifully like so many walls. The extended leaves of that lotus are the garden-like dham, spiritual abode of Sri Radhika, the most beloved of Krishna.
The surrounding external plane of Gokul is described in this verse. There is a mysterious quadrangular place named Shwetdweep surrounding the outskirts of Gokul. Shwetdweep is divided into 4 parts on all sides. The abode of Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna and Anirudh are separately located in each of these 4 parts. These 4 divided abodes are
by the fourfold human requirements such as piety, wealth, passion, and liberation, as also by the 4 Vedas, namely Rik, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, which deal with the mantra and which are the basis of achievements of the fourfold mundane requirements. 10 tridents are fixed in the 10 directions, including the zenith and nadir. The 8 directions are decorated with the 8 jewels of Mahapadma, Padma, Shankha, Makara, Kachapa, Mukunda, Kunda, and Nila. There are 10 protectors, Dikpalas, of the 10 directions in the form of mantra, the associates of the hues of blue, yellow, red, and white, and the extraordinary potencies bearing the names of Bimala, etc., shine on all sides. The Lord of Gokula is the transcendental Supreme Godhead, the own self of eternal ecstasies. He is the superior of all superiors and is busily engaged in the enjoyments of the transcendental realm and has no association with his mundane potency. Krishna never consorts with his illusory energy. Still, her connection is not entirely cut off from the absolute truth. When he intends to create the material world, the amorous pastime, in which he engages by consorting with his own spiritual chit potency, Rama, by casting his glance at the diluting energy in the shape of sending his time energy, is an auxiliary activity. The secondary process of association with Maya is described. Rama Devi, the spiritual chit potency, beloved consort of the Supreme Lord, is the regulatrix of all entities. The divine plenary portion of Krishna creates the mundane world. At creation there appears a divine halo of the nature of his own subjective portion, Shvangsha. This halo is divine Shambhu, the masculine symbol or manifested emblem of the Supreme Lord. This halo is the dim twilight reflection of the supreme eternal effulgence. This masculine symbol is the subjective portion of divinity who functions as progenitor of the mundane world, subject to the supreme regulatrix, Niyati. The conceiving potency in regard to mundane creation makes her appearance out of the supreme regulatrix. She is Maya, the limited, non-absolute apara potency, the symbol of mundane feminine productivity. The intercourse of these two brings forth the faculty of perverted cognition, the reflection of the seed of the procreative desire of the Supreme Lord. All offspring of the consort of the great Lord Maheshwar of this mundane world are of the nature of the embodiment of the mundane masculine and feminine generative organs. The person embodying the material causal principle, that is, the great Lord of this mundane world, Maheshwar, Shambhu, in the form of the male generating organ, is joined to his female consort, the limited energy Maya, as the efficient causal principle. The Lord of the world, Mahavishnu, is manifest in him by his subjective portion in the form of his glance. The Lord of the mundane world, Mahavishnu, possesses thousands of heads, eyes, hands. He is the source of thousands of avatars in his thousands of subjective portions. He is the creator of thousands of individual souls. The same Mahavishnu is spoken of by the name of Narayan in this mundane world. From that eternal person has sprung the vast expanse of water of the spiritual causal ocean. The subjective portion of Sankarsana, who abides in Paravyoma, the above supreme Purusha with thousands of subjective portions, reposes in the state of divine sleep, Yoga Nidra, in the waters of the spiritual causal ocean. The spiritual seeds of Sankarshan, existing in the pores of skin of Mahavishnu, are born as so many golden sperms. These sperms are covered with 5 great elements. The same Mahavishnu entered into each universe as his own separate subjective portions. The divine portions that entered into each universe are possessed of his majestic extension. That is, they are the eternal universal soul, Mahavishnu, possessing thousands of heads. The same Mahavishnu created Vishnu from his left limb, Brahma, the first progenitor of beings, from his right limb, and from the space between his 2 eyebrows, Shambhu, the divine masculine manifested halo. The function of Shambhu in relation to jivas is that this universe enshrining the mundane egotistic principle has originated from Shambhu. Thereupon the same great personal Godhead, assuming the threefold forms of Vishnu, Prajapati, and Shambhu, entering into the mundane universe, plays the pastimes of preservation, creation, and destruction of this world. This pastime is contained in the mundane world. Hence, it being perverted, the Supreme Lord, identical with Mahavishnu, prefers to consort with the goddess Yoga Nidra, the constituent of his own spiritual chit potency, full of the ecstatic trance of eternal bliss appertaining to his own divine personality. When Vishnu, lying in the ocean of milk, wills to create this universe, a golden lotus springs from his navel pit. The golden lotus with its stem is the abode of Brahma, representing Brahmaloka or Satyaloka. Before their conglomeration, the primary elements in their nascent state remained originally separate entities. Non-application of the conglomerating process is the cause of their separate existence. Divine Mahavishnu, primal Godhead, through association with his own spiritual chit potency, moved Maya, and by the application of the conglomerating principle, created those entities in their state of cooperation. And after that, he himself consorted with Yoga Nidra by way of his eternal dalliance with his spiritual chit potency. By conglomerating all those separate entities, he manifested the innumerable mundane universes and himself entered into the innermost recess of every extended conglomerate, Virad Vigraha. At that time, those jivas who had lain dormant during the cataclysm were awakened. The same jiva is eternal and is for eternity and without a beginning, joined to the Supreme Lord by the tie of an eternal kinship. He is transcendental spiritual potency. The divine lotus which springs from the navel pit of Vishnu is in every way related by the spiritual tie with all souls and is the origin of 4-faced Brahma versed in the 4 Vedas. On coming out of the lotus, Brahma, being guided by the divine potency, turned his mind to the act of creation under the impulse of previous impressions, but he could see nothing but darkness in every direction. Then the goddess of learning, Saraswati, the divine consort of the Supreme Lord, said thus to Brahma, who saw nothing but gloom in all directions. O Brahma, this mantra, namely Kling Krishnaya Govindaya Gopijana Balabhaya Swaha, will assuredly fulfill your heart's desire. O Brahma, do thou practice spiritual association by means of this mantra, then all your desires will be fulfilled. Brahma, being desirous of satisfying Govinda, practiced the cultural acts for Krishna in Goloka, Lord of Shwetadvip, for a long time. His meditation ran thus. There exists a divine lotus of 1,000 petals, augmented by millions of filaments in the transcendental land of Goloka. On its world there exists a great divine throne, on which is seated Sri Krishna, the form of eternal effulgence of transcendental bliss, playing on his divine flute, resonant with the divine sound, with his lotus mouth. He is worshipped by his amorous milkmaids with their respective subjective portions and extensions, and also by his external energy, who stays outside, embodying all mundane qualities. Then Gayatri, mother of the Vedas, being made manifest, that is imparted by the divine sound of the flute of Sri Krishna, entered into the lotus mouth of Brahma, born from himself through his 8 ear holes. The lotus-born Brahma, having received the Gayatri, sprung from the flute song of Sri Krishna, attained the status of the twice-born, having been initiated by the supreme primal preceptor, God himself. Enlightened by the recollection of that Gayatri, embodying the 3 Vedas, Brahma became acquainted with the expanse of the ocean of truth. Then he worshipped Sri Krishna, the essence of all Vedas, with this hymn. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with the moon locket, whose 2 hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful 3-fold bending form of Shyamasundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the gyanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidant Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose effulgence is the source of the non-differentiated Brahman mentioned in the Upanishads, being differentiated from the infinity of glories of the mundane universe, appears as the indivisible, infinite, limitless truth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is the absolute substantive principle, being the ultimate entity in the form of the support of all existence, whose external potency embodies the threefold mundane qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and diffuses the Vedic knowledge regarding the mundane world. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose glory ever triumphantly dominates the mundane world by the activity of his own pastimes, being reflected in the mind of recollecting souls as the transcendental entity of ever blissful cognitive rasa. Lowest of all is located Devi Dham, mundane world. Next above it is Mahesh Dham, abode of Mahesh. Above Mahesh Dham is placed Hari Dham, abode of Hari. And above them all is located Krishna's own realm, named Goloka. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who has allotted their respective authorities to the rulers of those graded realms. The external potency Maya, who is of the nature of the shadow of the Chit potency, is worshipped by all people as Durga, the creating, preserving, and destroying agency of this mundane world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in accordance with whose will Durga conducts herself. Just as milk is transformed into curd by the action of acids, but yet the effect curd is neither same as nor different from its cause, namely milk, so I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is a transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. The light of one candle being communicated to other candles, although it burns separately in them, is the same in its quality. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who exhibits himself equally in the same mobile manner in his various manifestations. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who is assuming his own great subjective form, who bears the name of Shesha, replete with the all-accommodating potency, and reposing in the causal ocean with the infinity of the world in the pores of his hair, enjoys creative sleep, yoga nidra. Brahma and other lords of the mundane worlds, appearing from the pores of hair of Mahavishnu, remain alive as long as the duration of one exhalation of the latter, Mahavishnu. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whose subjective personality Mahavishnu is the portion of portion. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom the separated subjective portion Brahma receives his power for the regulation of the mundane world, just as the sun manifests some portion of his own light in all the effulgent gems that bear the names of Suryakanta, etc. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, whose lotus feet are always held by Ganesh upon the pair of tumuli protruding from his elephant head, in order to obtain power for his function of destroying all the obstacles on the path of progress of the three worlds. The three worlds are composed of 9 elements, namely fire, earth, ether, water, air, direction, time, soul, and mind. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, from whom they originate, in whom they exist, and into whom they enter at the time of the universal cataclysm. The sun, who is the king of all the planets, full of infinite effulgence, the image of the good soul, is as the eye of this world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in pursuance of whose order the sun performs his journey, mounting the wheel of time. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, by whose conferred power are maintained the manifested potencies that are found to exist of all virtues, all vices, the Vedas, the penances, and all jivas, from Brahma to the meanest insect. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who burns up to their roots all fruitive activities of those who are imbued with devotion, and impartially ordains for each the due enjoyment of the fruits of one's activities, of all those who walk in the path of work, in accordance with the chain of their previously performed works, no less in the case of the tiny insect that bears the name of Indragopa than that of Indra, king of the Devas. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, the meditators of whom, by meditating upon him under the sway of wrath, amorous passion, natural friendly love, fear, parental affection, delusion, reverence, and willing service, attain to bodily forms befitting the nature of their contemplation. I worship that transcendental seat known as Shweta Dweep, Whereas loving consorts, the Lakshmis in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover. Where every tree is the transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gait is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant, effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty. Where numberless milk cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the space of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. On hearing these hymns containing the essence of the truth, the Supreme Lord Krishna said to Brahma, Brahma, if you experience the inclination to create offspring by being endowed with the real knowledge of the glory of Godhead, listen, my beloved, from me to this science set forth in the following 5 shlokas. When the pure spiritual experience is excited by means of cognition and service, bhakti, super excellent unalloyed devotion, characterized by love for Godhead, is awakened toward Krishna, the beloved of all souls. The highest devotion is attained by slow degrees by the method of constant endeavor for self-realization, with the help of scriptural evidence, theistic conduct, and perseverance in practice. These preliminary practices of devotion, sadhana bhakti, are conducive to the realization of loving devotion. Loving devotion, than whom there is no superior well-being, who goes hand in hand with the attainment of the exclusive state of supreme bliss, and it can lead to myself. Abandoning all meritorious performances, serve me with faith. The realization will correspond to the nature of one's faith. The people of the world act ceaselessly in pursuance of some ideal. By meditating on me, by means of those deeds, one will obtain devotion characterized by love in the shape of the supreme service. Listen, O Viti, I am the seed, that is the fundamental principle of this world of animate and inanimate objects. I am Pradhan, the substance of matter. I am Prakriti, material cause, and I am Purusha, efficient cause, the fiery energy that belongs specially to the Brahman, that inheres in you, has also been conferred by me. It is by bearing this fiery energy that you regulate this phenomenal world of animate and inanimate objects. Sri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sakchidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Sahasrapatra Kamalam Gokulakyam Mahatpadam Tadkarnikaram Taddama Tadanantam Shasambhavam Karnikaram Mahadyantram Shatkonam Vajrakilakam Sharanga Shatpadistanam Prakritya Purushena Cha Premananda Mahananda Rasena Vastitam Hiyat Jyoti Rupena Manuna Kama Bijena Sangatam Tat Kinjalkam Tadangshanam Tat Patrani Shriyam Api Chatur Asram Tat Paritaha Shwetadipakyam Adbhutam Chatur Asram, Chatur Murtesh, Chatur Dhamma, Chatuskritam, Chatur Bi Purushartaischa, Chatur Bir Hetu Virvratam, Shular Dashabir Adantam, Urdvado Didvikshapi, Ashtabir Nidibir Justam, Ashtabhi Siddhibistata, Manurupaishcha Dashabir, Dikpalai Paritovritam, Shamar Gauraischa Raktaischa Shuklaischa Parshadarshapai Shobitam Shakti Bistabir Adbhuta Bisamantataha Evam Jyotirmayo Deva Sarananda Paratparaha Atmaramastyatasyasti Prakrityana Samagamaha Mayaya ramamanasya naviyogastaya saha Atmana ramaya reme tyakva kalam sashikshaya Niyati sa rama devi tatpriya tadvasham tada Talingam bhagavan shambhur jyoti rupa sanatanaha Yayoni sapara shakti kamo bijam mahaddarehe Linga yonyatmika jata ima maheshvari prajaha Shaktiman purushasoyam linga rupi maheshvaraha Tasmina virabu linge mahavishnu jagatpatihi Sahasra shirsha purushaha sahasraksha sahasrapad Sahasrabahur vishvatma sahasramsha sahasrasuhu Narayana sabhagavan apastasmat sanatanat Avirasit kararnano niti sankarshanatmakaha Yoga nidram gatastasmin sahasramsha swayam mahan Tadroma bilajaleshu bijam sankarshanasya cha Haimanyandari jatani mahabhuta vratani tu Pratyandam evam ekam shad vishati swayam Sahasramurtha vishvatma mahavishnu sanatanaha Vaman gad asrijad vishnum dakshinan gad prajapatim Jyotirlingamayam shambhum kurchadeshad avasrijat Ahankaratmakam vishvam tasmad etad vyajayata Atataistri vidharvesher lilam udvahatakila Yoga nidra bhagavati tasra shrireva sangata Sashikshayam tato nabes tasya padmam baniryayao Tannalam hilmanalinam brahmano lokum adbhutam Tadvani purvarudhani karanani parasparam Samavaya prayogachcha vibinnani pratak pratak Chitshaksha sajjamanota bhagavan adi purushaha Yojayan mayaya devo yoga nidram akalpayat Yojayitva tutanyeva pravivesha swayam guham Guham pravishte tasmimstu jivatma pratibhudyate Sanityo nitya sambandha prakritischa paraivasa Evam sarvatma sambandham nabhyam padmam harerabhut Tatra brahmad bhavad bhuyash chaturvedi chaturmukha Sanjato bhagavat chaktya tatkalam kilakchoditaha Sashikshayam matim chakre purva samskara samskritaha Dadarsha kevalam dvantam nanyat kim api sarvataha Uvacha puratastasmai tasya divya saraswati Kama krishnaya govinda he gopi jana ityapi Balabhaya priya vanir mantram te dasyati priyam Tapastvam tapeetena tavasidhir bhavishyati Atha te pe sasuchiram prinam govindam avyayam Shweta dvipa patim krishnam golokastam paratparam Prakritya gunarupinya rupinya paryupasitam Sahasradala sampande kotikinjalka brimhite Bhumischinta manistatra karnikare mahasane Samasinam chidanandam jyotirupam sanatanam Shabda brahma mayam venum vadayantam mukhambuje Vilasini ganavratam swarshar amshar abhishtutam Atha venu nidadasya trayimurti mayi gatihi Spuranti prabhiveshashu mukhabjani swayambhuvaha Gayatrim gayatastasmad adigatya sarojajaha Samskritashchari gununa dvijatam agamat tataha Traya prabudho ta vidhir vignata tatvasagaraha Tushtava vedasarena stotrinadena keshavam Chintamani prakara sadma sukalpa vriksha Laksha vriteshu surabira pipalayantam Lakshmi sahasra shatasambrama sevyamanam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Venum kwanantam aravindantalayataksham Barhavatam samasitam buddha sundarangam Kandarpakoti kamaniya vishesha shobham Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Alodar chandra kalasadvanamalya vamshi Ratnan gadam pranaya keli kalavilasam Shyamam tribangalalitam niyata prakasham Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Angani yassa sakalendriya vrittimanti Pashanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti Ananda chinmaya sadujvala vigrahasya Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Advaitam achutam anadim anantarupam Adyam purana purusham navayovanam cha Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhaktao Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Pantastu koti shatavatsara sambragamyo Vayodhatapi manaso munipungavanam Sopyastiya praparasimdya vichintya tatve Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Ekopya saura charitum jagadanda koting Yat shakti rasti jagadanda chayaya dantaha Andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yad bhava bhavita diyo manujastataiva Samprapya rupa mahima sanayana bhusha Suktar yameva nagama pratitaistu vanti Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Ananda chinmaya rasa pratibhavitabis Tabirya eva nijarupa tayaka labhi Goloka eva nivasatya kilatma bhuto Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Premanjana chudita bhakti vilochanena Santak sadaiva hridayeshu vilokayanti Yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Ramadi mutishu kalani amena tishtan Nanavataram akarod bhuvaneshu kintu Krishna swayam samabhavat parama pumanyo Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yasya prabha prabhavato jagadanda koti Koti shashesha vasudari vibhuti bindam Tad brahma nishkalam anantam ashesha bhutam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Maya hiyasya jagadanda shatani sute Traigunya tad vishaya veda vitayamana Sattva-valambi parasatvam vishuddha sattvam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Ananda chinmaya rasatmatayamanasu Yapraninam pratipalam smarutamupetia Lilaitena bhuvanani jayatya jastram Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Golokadamni nijadamni taleta tasya Devi mahesha haridama suteshu teshu Te prabhava nichaya vihitascha yena Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Shristi stiti pralaya sarana shakti reka Chayeva yasya bhuvanani viparati durga Ichchanurupam api yasya chateshtatesa Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Shiram yatadadirvikari shesha yogad Sanjayate nahitatah pratagasti heto Yasham bhutam apitata samupaiti karyad Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Departureva hidashantanam abhyupetya Dipayate vrivata hetu samana dharma Yastadrageva hicha vishnu chaya vibhati Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yakarnarnavajale bhajati sma yoga Nidramananda jagaranda saromakupaha Adhara shaktim avalamya param smamurtim Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yasyaika nishvasitakalamatavalamya Jivanti loma vilaja jagadannanata Vishnur mahansa ihayasya kala vishesho Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Bhasvanyatasma sakaleshu nijeshu tejaha Swiyam kiyat prakatayat tapitadvadatra Brahmaya esha jagadanda vidhana karta Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yat pada pallava yugam vinidaya kumbha Dvandve pranama samaye saganadi rajaha Vignan vidhantum alamasya jagatrayasya Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Agnir mahi ganganamam mumurudishascha Kalastatatma manasiti jagatrayani Yasmad bhavanti vivavanti vishanti yamcha Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yat shakshuresha savita sakalagrahanam Rajastamasta suramurti rashesha tejaha Yasyagnaya brahmati sambratakala chakro Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Dharmo tapapa nichaya shrutayastapamsi Brahmari kita patagavadayascha jivaha Yadata matra vibhava prakata prabhava Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yastvindra gopam atavendra mahosakarma Bandhanurupa palabhajanamatanoti Karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhajam Govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami Yam krodha kama sahaja pranayari bhiti Vatsalya moha guru gaurava sevya bhavai Sanchincha tassa sadrishim tanamapurete Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Sri Akanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Druma Bhumischintamani Ganamayi Toyamamratam Kataganam Datyam Gamanam Apivamshi Prayasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Paramapas Asadyam Apicha Sayatra Shiradhi Sravati Surabhibhyasya Sumahan Nimeshardakyo va vrajati nahi atrapi samayaha Bhaje Shweta Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golokamityam Vidantaste Santa Shiti Virla Chara Katipaye Ato Vacha Mahavishnur Bhagavantam Prajapatim Brahman Mahatva Vignane Praja Sarge Chachinmatihi Pancha Shloki Mimam Vidyam Vatsatatvam Nibodame Prabhude Jnana Bhakti Vyam Mayananda Chinmayi Ude Tunatama Bhaktir Bhagavat Prema Lakshana Pramanaistat Sadacharais Tadabhyasir Nirantaram Bodhayanat Manatmanam Bhaktimapyutamam Labed Yasya Shreyaskaram Nasti Yaya Nivritumapnuyat Yasarayati Mameva Bhaktim Tameva Sarayet Dharmananyan Parityaja Mamekam Bhaja Vishwasan Yadrishi Yadrishi Shadha Siddhir Bhavati Tadrishi Kurvan Nirantaram Karma Loko Yam Manavartate Tenaiva Karamana Dhyayan Mam Param Bhaktimichyati Aham Hi Vishvasya Characharasya Bijam Pradhanam Prakritihi Pumamscha Maya Hitam Teja Idam Bibarshi Vide Videhi Tvamato Jaganti Ishvaraha Parama Krishna Sakchirananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Iti Sri Brahma Sanghita Sampurnam Hari Om. Were you having a hard time seeing it there because of the sun? Oh, me? No, I'm all right. Thank you. No, it's the skylight anyway. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janabalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Avantika Kartal Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotarista Shishimad Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Stotarista Shishimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Anantagati Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gokopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Shri Jagannath Puri Ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. All glorious to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, text number 12. Is everybody comfortable? Yeah? There's Zafus in the back if you need them, in that big basket. Everyone okay? Anybody need a book stand? Raise your hand if you want a book stand. Okay. Ice cream? Okay, one here. Touch Chadadhana Munayo. Touch Chadadhana Munayo. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. Pashyanti Atmani Chatmanam. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam. Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Tachchadadhana Munayo. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam. Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Tachchadadhana Munayo. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam. Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Tachchadadhana Munayo. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Tachchadadhana Munayo. Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Vaishnavis. Tachchadadhana Munayo.
Vairagya Yuktaya.
Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
Tachchadadhana Munayo.
Tachchadadhana Munayo.
Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya.
Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Pashyantyatmani Chatmanam.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya. Tat. That. So this is tat. It's referring to previous verses of description of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shadadhana. Seriously inquisitive. Munayaha. Sages. Jnana. Knowledge. Vairagya. Detachment. Yuktaya. Well equipped with. Pashyanti. See. Atmani. Within himself. Cha. And. Atmanam. The Paramatma. Bhaktya. in devotional service. Shruta, the Vedas, grihitaya, well received. Translation. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Let's say together. The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.Z. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are 4 different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other 3 are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. Second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the Absolute Truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, that is, the paths of jnana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the Absolute Truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge, combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the Absolute Truth. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are 3 classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third class. The third class devotees are the neophytes who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted to the preliminary process of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see 4 principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the Absolute Truth. A third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources, the Bhagavata. The number 1 Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. The third class devotee, therefore, has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood in the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadeva Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all-around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing. So, one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam are undoubtedly transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man who spoils them as a serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, and Pancharatra authorities, the make-show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literature, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. Om Ajnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Skapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Gopremanande Haribo Tachadadhana Munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashyantya Manichatmanam Bhaktya Shutagrihitaya. So this verse brings out three important elements that we need to fortify ourselves to move forward in the process of devotional service. First is that we have to have knowledge. Knowledge gives us vision to see anarthas and to be able to distinguish between what is valuable and what is not valuable. Otherwise, it's natural, if we don't have that knowledge, that we'll waste our time pursuing those things which are of inferior nature and which have ultimately no benefit for us at all. That's what an anartha is. So, first we have to have this vision. And in fact, there's a discussion given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There is a discussion by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, quoted by Srila Prabhupada in the 24th chapter of the Madhya Lila, in which he describes, does Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the various anarthas, their categories. And just as a gardener becomes expert in seeing what kinds of weeds are particularly noxious and dangerous and must be eradicated, and being able to distinguish what is a weed from actually the productive plant, and learning how to take it out. Similarly, the devotee with knowledge has to be able to distinguish what is the devotional creeper and what is a weed or an anartha. And there are various categories listed by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that one may take to various kinds of mundane processes, thinking that they're necessary in order to assist the process of devotional service, or maybe involved in cheating or becoming attached to politics and so forth. There's a list, which we can go into later. So this knowledge is necessary to see our way forward, otherwise we won't be able to distinguish what is real devotional service and what is the imitation. And then we also have to have vairagya, which means detachment or strength. This is a kind of strength, a spiritual strength. And that really means the ability to pull the weeds out. As you may see them, but then you may not have the strength. Therefore, the two are mentioned, jnana and vairagya. You have to have vision, and you also have to have strength. So what is that strength? It means that you have the objectivity to say, I don't need this, and take it out. One who is materially attached becomes captured by a very limited vision. But one who has knowledge has a much greater vision to see his or her predicament in the material world. For instance, one with knowledge can tolerate things because he or she sees that I'm just passing through. Others may become vitally attached to things that are very unimportant and so forth. But one who has this vairagya, it's a kind of a strength to be able to not only through knowledge see what is important and what is not important, but also to eradicate those things that are not important. That's a great ability to be able to do that. For instance, if someone decides they're going to clean up the clutter in their home, they might go through this interesting experiment to see how one can do this. Sometimes one thinks about it, but then hangs onto an item like, I can't give that up. I can't give that up either. I'll just leave it all here. And there are people who live in heaps and heaps of things they can't give up. I've seen it. Actually, some people die because they bring in so many things that eventually it caves in on them. It's actually sad. Satyadev Prabhu told me about quite a few cases in San Francisco where people walled themselves in collecting. My father was a psychologist. He used to tell me about people who would collect all kinds of things, magazines. There's people who make it their life goal to grow their fingernails as long as possible. And they spend their whole life, fingernails. So there's lots of things you can become attached to. It's not that hard because by nature we're attached. But by knowledge and vision and by strength of purpose through objectivity, we can actually choose those things which are important and winnow out those things that aren't important. And in this verse also gives a third point, which is we have to have thoughtfulness. There has to be a degree of deliberation. We have to deliberate, which means that we have to be very conscious and intentional in our life. This deliberation comes from liberare, which is a scale. Libra, the sign of the scale, the balanced person. And so deliberare means you have to be able to deliberate and look at things. What is their weight? What is the important part? And carefully analyze how you're going through your life, so as to ultimately dispel all kinds of unfavorable doubts and redirect one's desires towards devotional service. So this verse is giving this formula that these three things are necessary. And in the word for word, tat is referring to that. When we say Om Tat Sat, tat means that Supreme Personality. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pashanti Suryaho Divivachakshara. Om Tad Vishnu. We're talking, who is that? Om Tat. That is that person, that supreme origin of everything. So Tat, Shradadhana, is the seriously inquisitive. And the Acharyas have pointed out that this seriously inquisitive is a rare thing, because most people aren't seriously inquisitive about Tat. They're seriously inquisitive about lots of other things that aren't important. For instance, just driving over here, I saw someone with a little license plate cover, and it said Los Angeles Dodgers. For those of you who aren't baseball fans, it's a baseball team in Los Angeles. And he saw fit to go out and get a special cover for his. And I dare say there are people who invest their entire lives in following the statistics of everybody on a team and so forth. And there are unlimited varieties of things that one could become attached to. So the Bhagavatam goes out of its way to explain that souls who are seriously inquisitive about the Supreme are very rare. Muktanam api siddhanam narayana parayana. That there's very few people, there are many siddhas in the world, but very few of them are narayana parayana. They are, there are many species of life, and out of all those, there are a few that are human beings, and out of all the human beings, there are very few that inquire about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Muktanam abhisidhanam narayana parayana. What is the next line? So durlabha prashantatma koti shvapi mahamune. So these are very rare kinds of personalities that are actually completely peaceful, in that they're fully focused on Tat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a qualification to be seriously inquisitive, to ask, to want to know what is the Supreme Absolute Truth. And to this regard, one has to be submissive. One has to come to the point of recognizing that there is a way in which one can find a source, find a representative of perfect knowledge. One can consult a certain person or literatures and both, that can give one complete knowledge. There are ways in which people go through picking and choosing all kinds of various sources for their knowledge and say one's as good as the other and so forth. But those who are very serious come to understand through the process of doubting and then making discrimination that there is a way in which the Supreme reveals himself in this world, and there are perfect ways in which he does that. And when one comes to that conclusion, one should give one's full attention in that area to that person, to that literature. One should give one's full attention. This means to shradadhana. One should be like this, fully ready to inquire. One should not approach a representative of the Bhagavat and then say that I doubt what you're going to say, or I disrespectfully disagree with you before I ask you any question. This is not the mood. It's given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. That is the mood. Tadvidi pranipatena priprashnena sevaya uparakshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. He names 3 qualifications for this kind of deep inquiry. And one is that one must be humble. Pranipat. It means to put oneself before that source of knowledge, before that person, in a very humble way. Pranipat means really to bow down to that source of knowledge and admit that I don't know anything. Amanitvam adampitvam. One can't come full of oneself and think, I already know something, I already know that. Kids are like that sometimes when they're growing up. It's like, I know that, I already know that, I know that too, I know that, I know that. So we shouldn't be like that. We should be, I don't know anything. And even great scholars like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, when they approached Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they came with this symbol of straw in their mouth, saying that I'm very fallen and lowly. And Rupa Goswami expressed himself saying that many people say that I'm a great scholar, but actually I'm so foolish I even believe them. But I don't even know who I am. Please tell me who I am. He started there. Pariprashnena means making relevant inquiries. When one comes to a person who's qualified, one should think of relevant inquiries to make in front of that person so that one can advance in spiritual life. Absurd inquiries are not allowed. There's a recording of one of my godbrothers who was first joined the Sankirtan movement in Japan, and he asked Prabhupada an absurd question. He said, have you ever met Indra? Because Prabhupada was saying, ask some questions, and he said, have you ever met Indra? And Prabhupada said, what difference does it make if I've met Indra or not? And this is a kind of asking for why. Why are you asking that question? Should be sincere inquiries. Tadvidi pranipatena priprashnena sevaya. And then one should also render service to the person. And in that way, there's goodwill developed when you serve somebody sincerely. And you really just want to serve them selflessly because you appreciate what they have and who they are. Then naturally their heart comes out to you. And you can experience this for yourself. If someone comes to you wanting to know something and they're already full of themselves, they already know everything. In fact, some conversations, you can't tell if somebody's actually asking a question. Do you really want to know something, or are you just going to talk? And also, if they are not inclined to serve, then the heart doesn't open. But if someone serves you and asks sincere questions and is very humble, then it's just natural that whatever's in your heart, whatever knowledge you have, you'll feel indebted. You'll want to give it to them. So there's this process of exchange. So these are some of the qualifications. Tashradhana. Therefore, again, it's said that devotional service is rare and difficult to attain because people are not in this mood. Then, Jnana Vairagya. Devotional service which is served by knowledge and renunciation, that it has itself created. So this comes up before this verse. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashur Vairagyam Jnanam Chayara Haitukam. When you render service to Krishna, then you get this knowledge and detachment. It comes from bhakti. Bhakti Stvayi Stirataya. This describes by Bilva Mangal Thakur that there's a way in which mukti and also knowledge, detachment, everything else that people are searching after in this world come as the servants of bhakti, and they'll stand at the door of the devotee who's engaged in direct, pure devotional service, waiting to serve, saying, I offer my services to you. So this is a clear understanding given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that if you render devotional service, then naturally Jnana and Vairagya will come. And will be available to you. It comes from bhakti. So yuktaya means one should be equipped, well equipped with these things, jnana vairagya. Pashyanti. Such persons come to directly see the Lord, and atmani, they see the Lord within their own hearts. Who do they see? Atmanam, the Paramatma. So bhaktya, with great spiritual love born from attraction to hearing about the Lord. This is the main symptom of bhakti. Mad guna shuti matrena. This is described by Lord Kapiladev when he's telling Devahuti what the symptom of transcendental bhakti is. That by hearing about me, the devotee is interested to hear. Madguna shuti matrena mayi sarva guhashaye. That the devotee is captivated by the topics of Krishna and by the information that is about Krishna, and his mind is fully absorbed in that. So it's described by Jiva Goswami when he's just telling about this verse, how Lord Brahma, and you can go to 2nd Canto, 2nd chapter, 34th verse. Studied the Vedas 3 times. He's the most intelligent person. It takes a while to study the Vedas. He did it 3 times. The first time he heard them as karma, second time he heard it as jnana, and the third time he understood that this is about bhakti. So one has to be thoughtful. That is, this verse is describing that there's a deliberation that needs to take place, a thoughtfulness that one has to take place, that one has to invest in order to understand the difference between karma, jnana, and yoga. In fact, there's a way in which devotional service is difficult to understand. Sometimes people ask the question about the difference between devotional service and altruism, for instance. Oftentimes people think, altruism, doing social welfare work, that it seems as if social welfare work would be the end result. Why don't you open hospitals, or why don't you feed the poor? I say, isn't this devotional service? In fact, some people translate this. There have been movements to translate the idea of devotional service into service to man as service to God. And this is actually showing real compassion, that you're able to work for people right now and so forth. So it's a little tricky to understand the difference between matter and spirit. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was, as he moved about the world, careful that his disciples would be kind to people. In fact, it's described how in Alarnath he was taking a yatra and there was some grihastha devotees with him and there were people begging and they walked by. And he told them, no, it's your duty as a grihastha, you should give to them, and so forth. And then he pointed out that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he was a grihastha, wherever he'd go, he'd give in charity to people, and so forth. And so there's a way in which there's a certain style a devotee had. In fact, it says that when he would take a boat across the river, that he would give extra to the boatmen, and so forth. A certain generosity of heart that devotees have. At the same time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was razor sharp about describing the difference between altruism and devotional service. In one analogy he gave about altruism, he said that it's like trying to drain the Pacific Ocean with one's hands, the process of social welfare work. In other words, take out all the water of the ocean with one's hands. He said you can be there for many, many yugas, billions and billions of years, trying to remove the water from the ocean with your hands. And he said, even if you succeeded, the water would just be in another place. So this is the basic position in the material world, that people are experiencing the results of their karma, and that they are in a disadvantaged situation in the material world because of lack of knowledge, because of ignorance. And it's not that if I help somebody materially, that will solve their problem. It won't solve their problem. The only thing that will ultimately solve their problem is if they come to full knowledge. This is brought up in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit are talking about how to balance one's way in this material world because of sinful activities that one may commit. And at first, Shukadeva tests his student Parikshit by saying that you can perform prayaschitta, reformatory measures to balance out the sinful activities you make in this world. And then Parikshit Maharaj said, this isn't going to work. This kind of balancing out sinful activities with other kinds of material solutions won't work. And his spiritual master said, very good. You're right. I was just testing you. And then he gave him another test and said, it's through knowledge that you'll come to that point. But then again, he rejected that, and then Shukadeva Goswami said it's by the process of bhakti that one will come to this position. Because there's a concomitant, knowledge and detachment naturally come. And these stopgap measures, in fact, there's a few selected words that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to use when he talked about mundane philanthropy, or trying to help people in this material world. Paltry, small-minded, stopgap, changeable, imaginary, pie in the sky, and narrow consideration. It's a narrow consideration. I have a bird feeder in my backyard because my father gave it to me. I don't know what he was thinking when he gave me a bird feeder. He was starting to get Alzheimer's, so he just gave it to me. And I thought, thank you, I'll take this. And so I kept it for years, and then I finally took it out and said, I'll feed a few birds in my backyard. And so I put out that bird feeder, and I realized that they really don't need me, because I may think I'm the big feeder of birds, come here, birds, I'll take care of you. Now you'll be happy and satisfied. And they're like, yeah, thanks. So we'll take that, and we'll take everything else that's around too. And when it runs out, they go on without me. I go on vacation, I go away, and it's just, life goes on. Life goes on. And the idea of philanthropy, it's a narrow consideration, thinking that I'm helping someone. Another thing Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say is, don't try to fill a hole with gold. In other words, there are naturally gaps in this material world due to people's ignorance, and because of their own reactions they're suffering in this material world. And to try to use up your life energy to fill those gaps is a waste of energy. Unless you deal with the root of the problem, Shukadeva Goswami says, that you have to remove the ignorance, the impression within the heart of the living entity that I am this body and I want to enjoy this material world. Then whatever process you use will be ineffectual. There's another couple of instances that describe this in one of the big cities in India, and I can't remember if it was Bombay or Calcutta. There was a program to make housing for people who were living on the streets. And there's a morning walk in which some of Prabhupada's disciples are with Prabhupada and saying, they're discussing this program, and some of the devotees who live there locally are saying that the people who got these allotments of apartments sublet them, and then came back and lived on the street. And Prabhupada noted that that's because it's their karma to live on the street. And then he said, and you Americans, he said, you come to America, come from America, and you come to India, but you live like Americans, because that's your karma. You come to another country, and how do you live? Well, like an American. What do you have? American stuff, American standard, whatever it is, because that's who you are. So he was pointing out that you can try to shuffle things around, but they'll revert back to where they were according to a person's consciousness. The consciousness has to be changed and elevated. It's not that by arranging things socially that things will become better for people. It simply moves the problem from one situation to another. And it will persist. The disease persists as long as the ignorance is prevalent within the heart. So, Lord Brahma, I'll read this verse. The great personality Brahma, with great attention and concentration of the mind, studied the Vedas 3 times, and after scrutinizingly examining them, he ascertained that attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the highest perfection of religion. Purport: Sri Shukadeva Goswami is referring to the highest Vedic authority, Lord Brahma, who is the qualitative incarnation of Godhead. The Vedas were taught to Brahmaji in the beginning of the material creation. Although Brahmaji was to hear Vedic instructions directly from the personality of Godhead in order to satisfy the inquisitiveness of all prospective students of the Vedas, Brahmaji, just like a scholar, studied the Vedas 3 times, as generally done by all scholars. He studied with great attention, concentrating on the purpose of the Vedas. And after scrutinizingly examining the whole process, he ascertained that becoming a pure, unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the topmost perfection of all religious principles. And this is the last instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, directly presented by the Personality of Godhead. The Vedic conclusion is thus accepted by all acharyas, and those who are against this conclusion are only Vedavadaratas, or as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. I had one other example I promised, but then I moved on and it slipped my mind. And that was that Prabhupada gives the story of how there was a family in which one of the children had a serious disease in which he was meant to fast. And the parents had to go out for a little while, and they entrusted this, there were 2 brothers, and they entrusted one of the brothers to take care of the other one while they were out, and said in no circumstances should he be fed, because he could die. And when the parents went out for this emergency, the sick brother said, I am very hungry, if I could just have a little cake, some paratha. The other brother thought, well, this is the kind thing to do. He's asking for food. And therefore he gave it to him. And the brother almost died, and the parents beat the other child. Prabhupada said that it was in the neighborhood, so it was like, why is he being beaten? And the story came out. And there's a way in which those who act in ignorance to try to help other people actually do what is called malevolent altruism. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would distinguish between malevolent, or that which causes harm, altruism to others, and the altruism of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which was to solve all the problems of the living entity. So real altruism is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought, which is the process of the Bhagavatam refined in such a way that anyone can practice it anywhere. That's what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought. He's the universal guru who taught how people everywhere, all over the world, can take to this process of devotional service. So it's founded in perfect knowledge. Lord Brahma studied the Vedas 3 times and came to the conclusion of devotional service. The Shruti, the Smriti, the Panchatriki Vidhi, scrutinized by all the greatest devotional scholars, is particularly about bhakti. And how to practice that bhakti is shown by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through his disciples, the Goswamis. And through our disciple succession comes from Prabhupada, showing how to engage practically in our everyday life this process of bhakti yoga. And therefore we should take it up very seriously with the amount of time that we have left. And we should also note how we're becoming filled with knowledge and detachment, which are the fortifying features. And we should also be very thoughtful about the process to analyze, how am I becoming free from anarthas? And how am I associating with devotees? How am I avoiding the offenses against chanting the holy name? And in that way, there is every possibility that one can come to the advanced stage of devotional service despite many disadvantages from birth, many disadvantages from the environment. And this is what is being urged by these verses, that we should take up the process of devotional service fortified in these ways. And now we'll take some reflections, starting with the Kuranath Prabhu, and then Mukharavind. And we welcome everyone who's joined us online this morning. Thank you for joining this non-denominational international community for hearing and chanting. Hare Krishna.
One brief comment and then a question. The discussion about philanthropy or altruism reminded me that for those who are Christians will know in the Gospels, I don't remember which Gospel or whether it's more than one, but there's an incident where I think it was Mary Magdalene, one of Jesus' followers, who this building used to be a shrine to Mary Magdalene, and she was anointing Jesus' body with like lotion or myrrh and stuff like that to make him feel comfort. And then Judas, one of the disciples of Jesus, said, we should have sold the expensive ointment and we could have gotten money that we could have given to the poor. And then Jesus said, the poor are always going to be with us, and no, she's doing the right thing, and you're wrong. Judas later came to betray Jesus and told the Romans where he was and stuff. The question is,
but do you want to give a purport to that?
Well, it's the same. It sounds like the same thing you're talking about. That we should know how to Manava Seva isn't always Madhava Seva. And, it's what you were talking about, like trying to empty the ocean with your hands, actual devotional service to the spiritual master, it does more good, watering the root of the tree for everyone than trying to just give material comfort to the poor, even though it's their karma to a certain extent to be poor.
And why just the poor? I mean, why not? A couple of things.
Why not give spiritual knowledge to the rich people who need it too?
Why only these kinds of people? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said the result of malevolent altruism is that one becomes atheistic, and that one also harms animals. He said these are inevitable results of malevolent altruism. And there is a way in which people, due to lack of perfect knowledge, in trying to help others, harm other living entities and think, well, I'll do good here, and they end up killing animals and so forth. Go ahead.
So the question was that how does this square with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instructions that the grihastas should have given charity to the poor beggars, and where's the balance? Where is our duty, at least as grihastas, to want to make a material better situation. Even though we know the world is a place of dukhalayam ashashvatam, at the same time it's part of our duty to, dig wells and plant fruit trees and make the world a better place and act in such a way that we're, supporting the progressive, just what the demigods want, what Dharma, demands, rather than doing something destructive. And where's the balance? How do we reconcile these two positions, that we have a duty to try to make the world a better place, and at the same time, if we're completely renounced and just say, oh, that doesn't matter, that's all material, I'm just gonna chant and be devoted to God and not do any of that stuff.
In the Gita, Krishna says, Atmaupam yena sarvatra, that the yogi who is perfect has this compassion or empathy for others. And he sees sukham va yadiva dukham. He knows about suffering in the material world. He knows what it's like to feel the pangs of hunger or poverty and things like that. And he knows that just because somebody isn't their body doesn't mean they're not suffering. So Krishna says this is a good yogi, someone who has compassion. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's point is he didn't want his, especially Grihastha disciples, to become hard-hearted and think we have ours, then you shouldn't have anything. And Grihasthas have a duty to be like parents to all kinds of living entities. They should think that I have something, but it's not mine. I got it from God. And therefore, I should share it with others and make sure that they get something too. The balance point is that one should act in knowledge. Although, as I mentioned, it's a certain style as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had, a certain generosity of the way he moved in the world rather than holding back. He appreciated that people were working hard to roam across the river, and therefore he didn't think, well, I'm a sadhu, why should I pay him anything? He paid him extra out of appreciation for what he was doing. At the same time, he dedicated his life's energy and mission to the core value of actually elevating people to real knowledge. So it is a balance, and that's why I was saying it's difficult to understand, because in one sense, I'm not my body, and there's a way in which it sure seems like I'm my body, though. I was told the story of Mahamuni when he had the flu in the Brahmacharya ashram in St. Louis, and he was lying on the floor in his sleeping bag, and he kind of groaned, and one of the new bhaktas that was there said, Prabhu, you're not your body. And with all his strength, he leaned up on his elbow, and he said, Prabhu, you're not my body either. And so there's a way in which a devotee is enlightened and understands that, yes, people aren't their bodies, but they're still suffering. But he doesn't dedicate all his energies to try to solve that problem. The social ills will go on because of the root cause. And therefore he deals with the root cause, but at the same time, as he moves about in the world, he doesn't make himself an object of scorn because he's stingy or something like that. And it also opens the heart to give. It's a natural way in which Krishna says in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, if you can't practice devotional service even, you should be a giver. You should just give charity. He said if you can't even give to Krishna, then you should just be charitable. Now that's not a recommendation that this is the strategy, that we should open hospitals, because that's also disparaged, because it misses the point. It saves the dress of a drowning man. But the point is that one should have an open heart. The heart should be soft. And we find this, that as we move about in the world, there are a lot of cares and concerns that can gather around the heart. Naturally, they come in, because this world is designed in such a way that these kinds of torments will be there. But if one opens up one's heart to others and thinks, how can I do good for others? There's a natural way that one feels relief, and one starts to feel a lightness of spirit by doing that. There's a natural thing, because we should be givers. So in that spirit, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted his devotees to be very charitable. In fact, he asked his sannyasis to go out every day and knock on 3 doors. And what did they have to offer? Harikatha. You should go and teach people Krishna consciousness. When you give it to other people, just the moment you go out and try to give to others, then your heart grows, you become bigger. It's like yesterday when we went on the Harinam Sankirtan. The moment I stepped out of the car down in Palo Alto and started walking down the street, there's a kind of exhilaration. We were walking down the street, and there's a new shop there, I noticed. It's called Forever Flawless. And I said, boy, there's another shop around here too, which is called Eternal Beauty. They're really trying to recreate this spiritual world there in Palo Alto. But from our point of view, it's really falling short, because it's kind of obvious. The man and woman that were in the Flawless Forever shop, they were asking us, well, where are you guys going? And it was like, well, you got it right here, Forever Flawless, just stay here. You know? Why do you want to come with us? But my point was, as soon as I got out of the car in that mood that we're here to give something, then anxieties lifted, the perspective became bigger, the heart became softer. And this is a natural way in which we should move about in the world, being prepared to give to others in whatever way we can. Mukharvind? No credit for words spoken without the microphone. Okay,
Thank
go
you
ahead.
for bringing the point of this inquisitiveness and what kind of questions we should ask. And I like one of the bhakti notes that you recently sent, the service inclined ear, in which the theme was the same. And actually, I like the whole thing, but the last line that you quoted from Prabhupada's second chance book, in which Maharaj Parikshit questioned Sukadeva Goswami, he said very submissively, "If you think that I shall be able to understand, please answer the question." So he was not abruptly asking. And you explain how the process of questioning, that is very instructive.
Thank you. That's helpful. How to have a service-inclined ear. Like, why are you asking? And there are different reasons that people inquire. One may be that one sees an exalted person because that person is exalted because the person has knowledge, and therefore I think, I'm going to get that. I'm going to go and get that, and then I'm going to go down the street and set up my own shop, and I'll be exalted too. And that may be the reason that I'm inquiring. It's like, give me that, give me this, give me this. And it's like, thanks, appreciate it, you know. And that's not the same as having a service-inclined ear. And also, what's really within the heart of the person doesn't come out completely when somebody's asking in that mood. What really comes out is that you get the external knowledge, but you don't really get what you need, which is your relationship with Krishna revived. Yes, Malini will go around this way.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the definition that you gave about knowledge. Many times I thought knowledge was to know things, what is, what that is, but the definition that you gave today is about knowledge is that you want to differentiate between what is anartha and what is not anartha. And the definition of detachment as a strength, I have not seen it that way, but even though you recognize an anartha, the strength to pick it up, that was very, very nice and practical.
Yeah, so in Bhagavad Gita we can back this up. Nasato vidite bhavo, nabhavo vidite sata, ubayor api drishnontas tvanayos tatvadarshibhihi. One who has this perfect knowledge sees the difference between that which is permanent and that which is temporary. And therefore he doesn't engage in the temporary. Tatvavitu mahabaho guna karma vibhagoyo guna guneshu vartanta iti matva nasajite. The result of this perfect knowledge is that one lays off the three modes of material nature, doesn't touch it, and engages rather in those things that are substantive, that are actually of full value. We're all self-interested. It's natural. But it's ludicrous to think that if I don't have perfect knowledge of myself, that my activities are going to lead to something good. And that includes for myself, or if I try to do for others. If I don't act in knowledge, I'll harm others and also harm myself. Thank you. And the other point was about you may know what to do, but you may not have the strength to do it. That's why jnana and vairagya go together. I made a couple notes about how somebody may don't know. You don't know anything. Complete ignorance. Then you may know, but have no faith. Or you may know and have faith, or you may know, have faith, and have the ability to act on the knowledge that you have. So this verse talks about how we have to have all these aspects in place in order to come to the high level of devotional service. Yes.
Prabhuji, I like the point where you said that no matter how much help we get, unless the altruistic activities, unless the consciousness changes, nothing is actually beneficial. But my question comes to my heart is, sometimes it happens in our spiritual life also, because Krishna sends so much help in the form of shastras, in the form of devotees, spiritual master. But then the anarthas like egoism and all that, it sometimes takes lifetimes. So what is the break point? Like how does that concept applies, that when does the consciousness change actually in spiritual life, or is it like you wasted all that, the help that you got?
Well, there's lots of instances in the Bhagavatam. There's stories given of those whose lives have changed, and we can observe the different ways in which people approach life. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna arto jignasa artarti gyanicha bharatarshava. There's 4 kinds of people that come to Krishna for different reasons. And instances of these various kinds of people who had needed something or were inquisitive, you can see what happened. In all cases, when they approach Krishna, there's a purification takes place for whatever the motive was. There's Dhruva Maharaj, who had this burning desire to get ahead of everybody else. It was, as my mother used to say, never underestimate the all show them syndrome. And he had that, all show them. We welcome everyone who's joined us online today. Thank you very much for taking the time to connect. So Dhruva Maharaj was like that, but when he met Krishna, there was a change in consciousness. And he said, I was searching for something really not very valuable at all, but now I really have the valuable thing. And there was a way in which the Lord made him take something anyway, so he could say, okay, here, you take this anyway. And then there's Chitraketu Maharaj, which is very striking. It's very close to home. You know, he really wanted something in this material world. He needed to have a son. He was in such a situation that everyone expected him to have a son. He was a king, and he really wanted to have a son. And that was his burning desire, but he just couldn't have a son. And, I mean, the Bhagavatam gives these examples. He had millions of wives. He couldn't get a son. So then a sage fulfilled his desire, but the sage had higher knowledge. Angira Rishi said, yes, I'll arrange for you to have a son, but he's going to cause you some lamentation. And Chitraketu Maharaj thought, no problem, most sons are disobedient, I can handle that. He didn't know what was coming. And when he had the son, he gave more attention to his wife who had the child and then neglected his other wives who became envious. They poisoned the son, and then he went blind with anguish. And in that moment, Angira and Narada came back, brought the son back into its body, who spoke to him, imagine that. And his consciousness really did change at that point. He had this teachable moment where he was in such despair that he was ready to hear something. He wasn't ready before that, and the sage told him that also. You weren't ready before. You couldn't hear anything I had to say. So we may practice devotional service for some time and then come to, mercifully, a point that we're absolutely ready to hear. I was thinking about how sometimes people ask how it is that karma is a reformatory process, since I can't remember what I did in my last life. But that's not true. We do remember. Remembrance isn't just putting together facts and figures in one's head or remembering, being able to recall specific instances. Remembrance, according to modern psychology and the Bhagavatam, is also a feeling, an overarching feeling that we get within our heart. And there's a way in which, after going through many lifetimes, bahunam jamanamante jnanavam mam prapadyate, there is a time at which one will say, no more of this. I remember deep in my heart. It's an emotional response to the material world. That's remembrance. And that comes from this experience of being over and over again disappointed in the material world. And there's a way in which the heart changes. And at that point, it's not that it won't come. You can't say it won't come. It will come. But when it does come, there's a complete surrender. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, and one realizes that my only interest in life is Krishna. And surrenders to that is sweet surrender. So we should hope for that, and we can pray for an early surrender, sooner rather than later, please. Yes, Hari Vamsha Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for wonderful class, and thank you for bringing out this verse, because I remember Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse, verbatim translation and purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, whole verse, so thank you. I really liked about the malevolent altruism, how you described, and how you stressed that the proper sambandha should be there. We may walk around and we don't just ignore that people have bodies, but we have to have a proper sambandha. And I would like to share a small anecdote with your permission. His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj was explaining that few years back, Madhva Mutt, the head, Pejavar Swami, they kind of decorated Udupi Krishna with a crown worth 2 crores. It was of diamonds. And they got a lot of back and forth from the press that why are you spending so much? You should have given it to the poor people. There are so many poor folks around. So the answer of Pejavar Swami was very inspiring and also straight and razor sharp. He said, consider the President of United States, how much you spend on him. You spend billions of dollars on just this person's security. And who is he? Just the controller of a country in the world, United States. And even he has that position, still he is not able to control. He gets hurricanes and Katrina and all those things. And he has to say that depend on the Lord. Now consider the Udupi Krishna, who is the controller of the whole planet. He is feeding everyone, taking care. Why should not we anoint him with the crown worth 2 crores? In fact, we should spend the entire money to decorate, his body. So that was very illustrative, relates to what you said, that sambandha should be clear. So thank you very much.
Yeah, nice. In terms of sambandha, understanding that Krishna is the root, he's the soul of my soul. It's not some imaginary idea. And this is why the malefic altruism comes to atheism, because we begin to say, well, there is no God. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say to people that just as the fawn approached Bharat in the story of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he became attached to the fawn, he said, so your karma will come to you also naturally, no matter where you move around or how you try to help other people, they'll still have their karma come to them. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So before the class, right, I had a disconnect with the three items that you mentioned, the devotional service, knowledge and detachment. I used to always think them as separate entities, but you nicely mentioned that as you perform your devotional service, knowledge and detachment automatically come along with that. So thank you for that.
Yes, and one can experience this for oneself if you take time every day to chant Hare Krishna. And this, someone might say, well, why are you sitting there chanting Hare Krishna? Why do you go out and feed the poor? When you sit and chant Hare Krishna with attention, you'll experience for yourself knowledge and detachment. And then you actually become of some use to others when you have that broader perspective, and your heart actually grows to a greater degree. But one can experience that if you allot time simply to think of Krishna, that you'll get these experiences the same way as if a hungry person eats and gets nourished, feels satisfaction, and the hunger goes away. So similarly, Bhagavatam says, when you spend time surrendering to Krishna, you'll get this direct experience.
Prabhu, I could really relate to that example which you gave about the two brothers. You are trying to do good to somebody, but it ends up as a problem for the other person. And like I was reminded of a very funny incident which happened in Mumbai, with your permission. So this is in Mumbai, the local train, it's called, the train service which runs within the city, and during rush hours it's some 2.5 times its capacity. So it doesn't have doors, and people are hanging on the doors. And there is this one guy who realizes that the train doesn't stop where he wants to get down. So the veterans there say, okay, don't worry, we do it all the time. Actually, train doesn't stop. The train just slows down. You just have to jump off and you will be okay. But to break your fall, you have to keep running for some distance. Otherwise, you will land flat on your face. So he does that. He jumps off the train and he keeps running. And the people in the compartment behind, they think, oh, he's one of us. He's trying to board the train. Okay, let us help him, actually. And they grab him in and pull him right back into the train. So that's how we might think that we are actually doing so much help, but it ends up as a problem to the other person.
Yeah, misguided. I like to go back to the idea, though, that there's a balance. The way that Vaishnavas move in the world, I remember in O'Hare Airport when there was a group that was opposing us for some time. And they had picked out verses from the books and from purports that seemed to condemn us. One of the verses they would like to show people as we were distributing books to show how evil we were was that the devotee laments neither for the living or the dead. How can they... Look at this. You see what it says in this book? They lament neither for the living nor the dead. They don't care about anyone, you know. But actually the devotees, again, they develop a soft heart. I remember when my father died, I was in Vrindavan, and Nirkula called me, she was back here, and said, you know, your father died. I think it was 2 a.m. And I was kind of shocked, because I'd never had, in this life, a parent die. And I remember walking, Dhruva and Samapriya were living downstairs from me at the MVT. And they knew that my father was in the throes, And I walked downstairs the next morning, I think after the morning program, I just saw them, and they said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I said, "My father died." And they came over and hugged me. They said, "Oh, and they gave me a hug, and I was thinking, it helped me. And I appreciated the fact that they didn't just say, we don't lament for the living and the dead. Which is what artificially, sometimes in the early parts of our Krishna consciousness movement, there was a way in which devotees would sometimes artificially do this and just say, it doesn't matter. It does matter. So going back to Akurnath Prabhu's point, there's a balance the way, sadhus, they do feel deeply, more deeply than anybody, but they don't try to misplace things. They help where they can, but they don't give all their energy to something that can't be helped, ultimately. And really, if devotees are talking to somebody about, so many times distributing books in the airport, I remember meeting people who were bereaved, and they were going because one of their relatives had died. And the one thing they really wanted was some spiritual counsel. And I remember after 9/11, I went to New York, and we were distributing books on the street, and grown men, businessmen would walk up and they would start crying. And they would ask, I remember one man was asking, "Is this book really true? Will this really help me?" Because he was so distraught. And this is what people really want. What they really need is ultimately this sambandha, this relationship with reality that's beautiful, that actually is forever flawless and eternally beautiful. They're not going to settle for the makeup. Kurnath wants to deepen the conversation, I can tell by his demeanor.
I don't know if it's really deeper, it might be lighter, but in law school, in torts class, there was an actual time during class where we studied these so-called Good Samaritan cases, where people, and these things actually happen. There's a flood and someone is drowning and someone decides to be a hero and jumps in, grabs the person and tries to bring them to shore, and then in the course of taking them, they come in contact with an electrical wire and they die or something like that. And then in law, you can actually, then the person's relatives sue you for wrongful death. You killed my friend. I was trying to save him. But the rule is that if you put someone, even if you're trying to save them, if you put them in a worse position than they were already in, then you're liable. But if they were going to die anyway, then you wouldn't be liable. And, but we actually, these things really happen, and it's a practical thing.
It's a complicated world. And that's why we're trying to talk about these two things, how a devotee moves about the world in a caring way, has compassion, but doesn't misplace that compassion as a world cause. There are lots of good causes in the world, so many millions of good causes, but one great cause. And one has to be able to distinguish, this is real knowledge, to understand the great cause from the many good causes, and not become diverted in the real mission of life for oneself or others. Yes. Shraddha has some texts coming in from our cherished and highly esteemed internet audience.
First and foremost, I got 3 Hari Bols. One from Preeti Radhika Mataji in
Haribol,
Sacramento.
Preeti Radhika.
One from Radha Venkat Prabhu.
Jai Radha Venkat.
And Bhaktin Kathleen.
Jai
Morgan.
Bhaktin Kathleen.
And here's a message from Nikul Bhatt. He says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, the point you mentioned that life goes on whether you play any role or not really touched me. Shows how insignificant we are. But on the other side, ego wants us to believe that we are the force behind things. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah, that's always a good lesson when Krishna can give one that realization of one's insignificance. Prabhupada signed his poem coming into Boston Harbor the most insignificant beggar. And remembering that, Krishna is doing, I'm only insignificant servant. Another point? Yes?
Yeah, I just had a question about you mentioned before about approaching perfect knowledge or complete knowledge through a process of doubt and deliberation, until you've kind of reached that point where you can see that God has manifested Himself somehow in the world. And I assume that the conclusion of this is is surrender. So I was wondering, like, if the character of that inquiry kind of changes at a certain point, or if there's still, just because complete knowledge exists doesn't necessarily mean one has assimilated that. So does one still have doubt, or still have some confusion while there's still, after the point of surrender, or does that come after a person has already reached the full conclusion of everything?
Yeah, it does have a different quality because one has a confidence in the source of knowledge. And this indicates an advanced devotee. A Madhyama Adhikari devotee has full faith in the scripture and takes shelter there. The neophyte devotee doesn't have full faith in the scripture, but when one comes to this full faith that this is where the answer is, then one has this sense of confidence. It doesn't mean, however, that one won't have doubts or questions. It's funny because in India, I think people say, I have a doubt. In America, people say, I have a question. Is it when Indian devotees sometimes first started asking me, I have a doubt. It's like, whoa, what happened? Are you okay? But doubting, in that sense, you see, even Arjuna was asking because he had a doubt he had doubts that he was putting before Krishna. How does this mix? How does this match with this, and so forth? And in Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit's conversation, I already pointed out in the 6th canto how Parikshit Maharaj had a doubt also about things that Shukadeva Goswami was telling him. And so he inquired further. And there's always further inquiry that one will make, because it's not that one comes to the end of knowledge and says, okay, I know everything now. But there's a way in which one has deeper questions. I always like to point out that in advanced association, one comes away with more questions than answers. When we hear and chant in a like-minded association that's more of devotees who are more advanced than us, the likely result is you come away with more questions, which means you're hungry. You're in a state of hunger for hearing more. And that process never ends because Krishna's unlimited. He doesn't know himself. How are we going to know him? I mean, he's so unlimited. He can't understand himself completely. So there's a way in which once we connect to the proper source and we have that confidence that this is perfect knowledge, and there's a way also to fortify our intelligence to understand that. Even if we don't have complete faith in that or a faith way, there are books like the Tattva Sandarbha, which was specifically written to give us a clear understanding of where to repose our inquiry. It's very indicative of this verse, Tachcharadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya, that we have to be fortified with knowledge. So you read Tattva Sandarbha, and systematically the author, Jiva Goswami, has showed where should you give your full attention, who should you hear from, and why. And throughout the Vedanta Sutra, there's a system in which the author will pose a doubt, and then he'll answer the doubt and give this Siddhanta. So there's this whole process of thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. And we're always coming to that and in the discussions. But one becomes more and more confident about the source of knowledge. At first, it's through an intellectual understanding, and then it becomes a realized understanding. And then there's a way in which, as is pointed out in this verse, one becomes aware of the Paramatma within one's heart through the process of devotional service. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that I'm giving that knowledge directly to the devotee. And the relationship in Buddhi Yoga means the devotee's realizing how Krishna is right there, and he's giving that direction to the devotee. But there are ways in which there can be mysteries also. Sri Advaita Acharya, when he was teaching the Bhagavad Gita, he's Mahavishnu, and he incarnated as Sri Advaita Acharya. But he was teaching the Bhagavad Gita, and then he came to a verse, he couldn't understand it. So he was fasting. He said, I'll fast until I can understand this verse. It is always interesting to me in the Chaitanya Bhagavad, it's described when some of these devotees fast. It was a very precarious situation. In any case, later on in the Mahaprakash, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was revealing his godhood to all the devotees, he told Advaita Acharya, I'm the one who came to you in your greatest hour of need when you couldn't understand this verse, and I revealed it to you from within your heart. And then this way he was showing all the devotees how he was there with them all the time. And Prabhupada also, sort of in a very practical way, tells in the second canto of the Bhagavatam how the supersoul can be realized as the intelligence. And he said any ordinary person can understand this, and he gives the process, right? We can sit down and you can begin to realize actually how super soul, super spirit, he gives in that purport, is right there with you, right next door, and you can see that for yourself.
Hare Krishna, Srila Gurudev.
Hare Krishna, Kalindi from Dallas.
Hare Krishna.
Go right ahead.
Please accept my humble obeisances. It's so glad to have you back.
Thank you.
I have a couple of comments, please, and then a question.
Okay.
I appreciate what you said. You mentioned that humility, sincerity, and service opens our hearts to knowledge.
Yes.
And then following that, a little later on, you mentioned about accumulating knowledge and detachment. By doing this, that we're better equipped to help people. So I appreciate that. And also, you answered a big question of mine that's been in my head for a while about having full faith, but you just a moment ago mentioned about it's okay to still have questions and doubts, and we can have full faith in the scriptures, but still have questions and doubts and wanting things, I guess, to add up. So I appreciate that. And my question is, when you were talking about earlier about altruism or philanthropy and things like that, how does I'm speaking of our Food for Life program, and should we distribute books when we pass out prasadam, or is it prasadam in of itself complete as far as not just being, well, we're just feeding the homeless type situation as maybe other groups do?
Well, the two usually go well together, but it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes when devotees are doing a prasadam distribution, and in the eyes of the public it's social welfare work, if we try to interject book distribution in some of those cases, they'll like, wait, hold on a minute. This isn't about religion. They don't understand that we're a kitchen religion. So it's a case-by-case basis. Reading in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, when the members of the Gaudiya Math, under the direction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, would oftentimes distribute prasadam, charity, to people who didn't have much food, and they would also, along with it, they would say, chant Hare Krishna, and they would chant And I remember in Japan, when there was a great economic downturn, when I was going there at that time, boy, they're the most organized homeless community in the world. There's a whole homeless community in Japan, and if you go to their place where all the homeless people live, it looks nicer than a lot of other places I've seen in America. They have these perfect tents built, and they're all like an organized community there. It's very clean also. But in any case, they would line up at Shinjuku Station, one of the biggest train stations in Japan, in Tokyo, and the devotees would give them prasadam, and as they were all lined up, the devotees would ask them to chant the Maha Mantra, and they would all, everyone in line would enthusiastically chant, and then they'd take prasadam. So, yes, we try to combine as many elements as possible, but if it's not possible, then we'll scale down and do the best we can under the circumstances. I hope that helped. But it's an individual case. Mukharvin?
Like some devotees in Philadelphia, like they started distributing these book coupons when they do the prasadam, so it's like not intrusive, and then it also gives them chance if they want to.
Right.
In the.
Yeah, that's right. You could innovate and find ways to connect with people. You've been trying to get in for a long time, Manjulika.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, sometimes you go away and we get really tired of waiting for you to come back. But today, sitting in the class, I'm sure many on the audience will also agree that, the first line of our morning prayer came back to me, and I said, this is like the kanakanatvam, the rain that comes after a parched, long period. So we are so grateful to hear your voice today, and it's been such a nice 2 hours of continuous Krishna Katha that you feel like if this was a spiritual world, then time would not so badly interfere. We could just stay in this state forever and you'd not feel the fatigue.
2 hours and counting, actually.
So I had a few questions, but today what I took back was Tat, because that word stayed with me, Tat, Om, Tat, Sat. And I realized initially I had no patience for the word to word. We think we know, like my daughter thinks she knows, and I work with her. I think I know because I have Sanskrit, and why should I read word to word? It's the most boring part of the lecture that I have to do that. And today I realized every word is so important. And by patiently listening to you do that month after month, now I'm able to taste it, what I couldn't taste before. So thank you so much for that. And I wanted to share a point with the discussion about doing charity versus doing books and stuff. When I was reading the first book, volume of Prabhupada's Leelamrita, it covers a lot of his philosophy, his preparation to start the process of Krishna consciousness here in America. And again, this topic comes back in so many places that, when I think about what we've discussed today, I feel that, as you said, it's case to case, but also that these choices are not made by us. It's Bhakti Siddhanta Goswami Maharaj, it's Srila Prabhupada who makes that choice to give alms as change to the beggars at when he goes for the snan. Remember the devotees say, why don't we give prasadam? Why are you giving money? And then Prabhupada says, but then for them this is prasadam. He makes that choice. So the senior devotees, the pure devotees, they are transparent mediums for the Lord to work. We cannot always understand what it is in their heart when they make a change to a regular philosophy. Like we always give prasadam, today we'll give cash. Whatever they decide, if as humble students, as disciples, we accept, then we will get the understanding in time to make that discretion, to understand why the choice was made.
It's a nice point, and I think also that we have to see that people are individuals in their individual circumstances. Even when we go to distribute knowledge, we make discrimination. Is this person ripe? And the scripture tells us to do that. It says you should discriminate between the different kinds of people. Is this a ripe field? And if it's not, be careful. Don't try to throw something in where it won't be taken care of properly. It will hurt your faith, it will hurt their faith. It's one of the offenses against the holy name is to try to impress upon people its transcendental nature when they're really not ready for it. And so this world is not stereotype. There's nothing about it that's stereotype, although sometimes the mind wants to categorize everything and say this fits here, that fits there. Every atom is unique, every soul is unique, and every circumstance is unique. Having said that, we do need some categorization, but there's also this intuitive way in which devotees move in the world and try to do good for others. And if that's their main intention and that's founded in perfect knowledge, it may vary from time to time, as you're pointing out. Okay, yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I am in doubt, so I have a question. So, based on Harivamsha Das Prabhu, is he here? Okay.
Harivamsha, yeah.
Yeah. So he mentioned about a crown worth $2 million, $20 million, 2 crores, 20 million, right? And used to decorate deities. So if today Harivamsha Prabhu gives me 20 million, what should I do with it? Should I use it in decorating deities or
Motel Gita?
Or exactly, this is my question. This was my question. Should I distribute Motel Gita, books, prasadam distribution, books distribution, Motel Gita, or decorate the temple only?
No, you can apportion some of it for each, but it's nice to have a cause in your life that's very clear. And Prabhupada wrote a letter to one of his disciples who was working with the BBT very closely and distributing books. He said, don't divert your mind even for a second from this service. And this was the way Prabhupada moved in the world. He didn't divert his mind even for a second from the mission of his guru. He was impressed by a verse in the Bhagavad Gita in which Krishna says that you should have this kind of one-pointed attention on the order of the spiritual master. He took it from the Vyavasayatmika Buddhir, and then the purport by Baladev, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that says this means to attach oneself to the order of the spiritual master. How do you apportion your energies in life, including your wealth? You have to connect. As this purport was saying, you have to find the Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. Everyone needs a person Bhagavat to connect with, to say, this person is connected to the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's the universal guru. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are fully dedicated to his cause, who come in the authorized line, because how is it authorized? They've heard properly, and they've surrendered in that line. Therefore, they also become representatives. When you find that place and you say, this is where I'm going to dedicate my energies, then you won't have a doubt about it. You just say, this is where I put it. This is where I apportion it. Well, I mean, you may have some doubt because, there's variety in spiritual life and you can give some here and give some there. But there should be some place where you have a very clear realization of where I give the bulk of my energy, including my wealth. What's that cause? Find that out, because it's really important to have that in your heart and say, this is how I move in life because of this cause. That's a very fortunate position to be in. If somebody wakes you up at 1:30 in the morning and says, what's your main cause in life? You should be able to say. And then you'll know where to give them. But Motel Gita, generally. Okay. Yeah, because even Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he was exasperated after, one disciple came forward with lots of money and said, I'll build you a flagship temple. And that disciple actually, he gave his heart and soul, not just his money, but his heart and soul and his life. He actually died the week that it opened. He gave so much to that temple, opening that temple in Bagh Bazaar. And after some time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta could see, okay, it's a building, great, and we're using it for Krishna, it's his temple, but the spirit behind some of his disciples were that now it's ours. And then not only is it ours, but this part's mine, because I preached more than you, and I've been around longer, so that's my room. And he saw that this was destructive, and he even said to his disciple, that our Srila Prabhupada, that I'd like to sell the marble from that temple and invest it in books. He had that spirit of how to do the highest good to people in general by distributing knowledge like that. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us online. Vancha kalpataruvascha kripasandabeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha gopremanande hari hari.